It's now time for the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. The Mike Wagner Show can be heard on Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, iTunes, Anchor FM, Radio Public, and the MikeWagnerShow.com. Mike brings you great guests and interesting people from all across the globe. So sit back, relax, and enjoy another great episode of the Mike Wagner Show.
Hey everybody, it's Mike from the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. Looking at a professional website without breaking your budget? Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs that blow the competition away. Call today at 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. Or email to support at sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show, get 10% off your first order. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level. Also, the Mike Wagner Show can be heard on the MikeWagnerShow.com. You can check our Facebook page at Facebook.com/The Mike Wagner Show. You can download and listen on Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Also on Anchor FM, Radio Public, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Deezer, and more. Take the Mike Wagner Show with you on any mobile device. Subscribe to the Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel. Also follow the Mike Wagner Show on Instagram and Twitter today. We're here with a wonderful gentleman living somewhere in the United States. He's the author of The Simple Life, and he was born and raised in the Sierra Nevada mountain range around California, and he's got a book called The Simple Life, Decluttering Your Life. He's also got a book called Guide to Financial Freedom, Going Off the Grid, and he has a very interesting, unique background, includes military intelligence, special agent for the U.S. State Department, Diplomatic Security, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the FDA, and just an amazing background which you can learn a lot of. Basically, it's people needing perspective and such things like simple living, health, nutrition, self-help, and especially being more self-reliant. And with all the nuts and bolts, ladies and gentlemen, from somewhere in the United States, and we are keeping it secret, ladies and gentlemen, author Gary Collins. Gary, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on, Mike.
And I could tell you're living a simple life, and you've got a book out right now, which is on Amazon. You're also the author of Guide to Financial Freedom and Going Off the Grid, and you've been in military intelligence, special agent for U.S. State Department, Diplomatic Security Service. Also, you're with the Health and Human Services Department, the FDA, and more. And you also have been in criminal justice, forensic science, and more. And before we get to all that, tell us how I got started.
How it all got started. The life of Gary or the simple life of going off the grid? There's two different phases.
well, let's start with the life of you, then the simple life of Gary.
Yeah, I grew up very rural, very simple, poor. You know, I always say it, the poor white kid with living in a trailer with the tires on the roof so it wouldn't blow away in windstorms. That was me.
Uh-huh.
And just was going through life and seeing growing up poor makes you hungry to not be poor. Because I always tell people, if you haven't been poor, it sucks. It's not terrible, but it's not fun either. And you kind of learn some hard lessons in life, but you learn a lot of great lessons too. Mm-hmm. And one of them is simplicity. You know, I didn't have a lot of stuff growing up. My most important things to me were my basketball, football, baseball glove, my dog, my hunting shotgun, and my bike. Mm-hmm. You know, those were my most important things, and those all total cost far less than a 16-year-old's cell phone or iPhone today. You know, those were my life. Mm-hmm. And once I got old enough, obviously my pickup truck, which I bought, I started working when I was 13 as a busboy prep cook in a restaurant. Those were different times when you could work without a worker's permit. I won't get my boss in trouble. And I learned the value of a buck. I learned the value of hard work, how to improve yourself and be better. And so I went and, played all sports through high school, did well in school. I worked really hard at school. I was no natural gifted intellectual giant, shall we say. Mm-hmm. And, went to college, went to San Diego State, go Aztecs, getting ready for the tourney. And, went to a town of 1,800 people to a college campus of 38,000 people.
Uh-huh.
So I was a fish out of water. And that was my kind of moving into more of a large city setting, let's say, from there on out, right? Mm-hmm. So from there on, graduated college, went in the military, did military intelligence, worked in the private sector for a little bit, and then became a federal agent. Huge, long process. I won't bore anyone with the details. It was very difficult back then. It was all done through paper applications. There's no submitting your application online or any of that good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a long, laborious process. And I got my first special agent job with the U.S. State Department. Traveled all over the world. Kind of gave me a different perspective on how other cultures live, the simplicity, open air markets. You go buy your food from, the open air market every single day. It just was a whole different lifestyle that it exposed me to. And after spending almost half my life in that type of lifestyle, government's, it's just high pressure, just a lot of stress. I was burned out, and I was just burned out in general. I was unhappy, but I'd accomplished all the goals I'd set out for myself. I owned a house, had the nice sports car, was living the life, but I was unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a reevaluation at that point, an introspection of where my life had gone. And I'd realized by following what I was told would make me happy actually made me unhappy. And that's where, working in the system and seeing the inside of the system, I had a different perspective too than most people. Not that I'm better than everyone. When you work inside the government, you get this. I always tell people, not only did I know how the sausage was made, I was the sausage.
Tasty.
Yeah. And I go, so you always look at things through a different kind of lens. It's just a different filter that you see things through. And at that point, I just had kind of just said, I'm done. I can't live like this anymore. I've got to change. I can't go through this. And so I left the government. Huge, long story. I can't tell it. But I left and started a whole new life. Basically sold my house for a pretty large loss. Moved into a very small cottage outside of San Diego and rebooted my entire life and started my own company. And, it didn't start off as writing. It was a health company. From the things I'd learned in the FDA and U.S. Department of Health and Human Services basically frightened me to death. And I thought as an athlete, I knew what I was doing. I didn't know. I realized, I don't have a clue. And so I had to reinvent my health on top of it. So all the things I learned, I wanted to share with people. And that's why I started a health company. But it was primarily working with athletes who were looking to go to major colleges. And I was getting fed athletes through a former All-Pro for the Green Bay Packers. And so it was a nice little business. But I could only reach so many people.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, but it was regurgitating of the same information all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started writing this stuff down, and I kind of came up with a handout to give to clients. That grew into a bigger handout. Eventually it grew into a health manifesto. It just kept growing. And I ended up having a marketing guy that I met randomly, and he goes, you should just put them in books. And so I did that and put them online. And I've always done interviews. So I was doing interviews and building the business that way. And that's basically how I started being an author, was accidental.
Mm-hmm.
In a way.
It sounds like you're doing a really good job with being an author, and all you have to do is just learn by doing. You have to go to school, go to class or anything. And just a couple of things that popped up when you work with the Department of Health and Human Services and the FDA. What parts of those agencies scared you?
All of it.
Or like some examples. Well, I mean, what are some of the things that got you scared? Like, some of the procedures or like some of the examples. I mean, you don't have to go into full detail.
Well, in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, it was a lot of Medicaid and Medicare fraud. That was primarily what we were investigating. And within Medicaid, Medicare fraud, most people don't understand that 1/3 of all the tax dollars that go to the federal government are actually used for Medicaid, Medicare, and disease prevention.
Mm-hmm.
That's 1/3 of the federal government's money is spent on our lack and poor health in the medical industrial complex. I love to call it that because that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I always say there's no money in healthy people. No, the reason Americans we're the most obese country and the most unhealthiest country in the world, and we spend by far the most on healthcare, is not by accident. It's by design. And that's what it taught me. It taught me that this is a scam. is what this is. This whole industry is primarily built upon keeping us in the dark and sick. That's what it's for.
Mm-hmm.
And people become incredibly rich off it. And I investigated a lot of doctors doing a lot of shady stuff. Doctors putting stents in 30-year-olds who didn't need stents. They didn't have heart conditions. It was $5,000 a pop. It was widget in, widget out, make money, get to the next one. And I just saw all these scams unfurl in front of me. And not only that, but how organized crime, the Russian mafia is deeply involved in Medicaid and Medicare fraud. And people go, what? And I go, it's easy money. They do it because it's easier than selling drugs. That's why.
That's true. That's true. And of course, I was thinking about the part about selling drugs and everything else. And this came to my mind too, that, a lot of states that do decriminalize marijuana. And I think that's, a really good thing too. And actually cures more of the illnesses out there than you do with the conventional medicine.
Well, and that's the fascinating thing, right? And for me, I'm always an open-minded guy. And so I could have been considered a little bit, of a square peg in a round hole in the government, because I was always a free thinker. I was always trying to come up with solutions to fix things. What I soon learned later in my career is our federal government does not care about solutions. Mm-hmm. They don't care. And I hate to be that way, but I was there. And don't get me wrong, we live in the most free and prosperous country in the world. I've been to some real crap holes. Trust me, we're lucky. We're lucky we were born here and we did it by no special, anything special on our own. We were just lucky and got born here. So that's what I look at. I was very fortunate, but our government is terribly and inherently corrupt at the top.
Mm-hmm.
It is, and I saw that from the inside and seeing that, and that's why marijuana is a Schedule III drug. Because the drug companies, until they can make money off THC and CBD, they're learning how, it's going to stay a Schedule III. It will go out of the schedules once the drug companies figure out how to make a bunch of money off it. That's where I had a lot of heartburn and a lot of problems, and watching, the amount of fraud involved. And it's like right now, the coronavirus. And I've gotten a bunch of people asking me, what do you think of the coronavirus? I go, haven't you noticed every new strain of the flu is now a pandemic? I go, because people become very, very rich off these supposed pandemics. I go, you have to look at it from a factual state of what is it? It's just a more severe version of the flu from what we can tell, right?
Right.
It's spreading exactly the same way as the flu. There's no difference that I can tell. And it's like, when we were dealing with SARS and, when I was in college, I remember the Mongolian flu running rampant. But as time's gone on, each one is now a crisis. And instantly, you notice Congress said the president goes, I'll give you $2.5 billion to deal with coronavirus. Well, okay, throwing money at it isn't going to fix anything. And then Congress goes, oh, no. We need $8.5 billion. We need $8,500 million.
Oh, my gosh.
And I'll tell you, I was there. They are enriching all their buddies. All that money's going to disappear. It's going to completely go into the ether. You'll never see it. They'll never fix anything. And a whole host of millionaires and even richer billionaires will be created out of that money. That's exactly what will happen.
And I was just going to ask you about the coronavirus, and I'm glad you mentioned as well, too. And can you imagine the coronavirus coupling with Lyme disease? You think about that?
Well, here's the thing, too. Think of it this way. What are the three major killers in the U.S.? Heart disease, cancer, medical accidents, or they call them medical accidents. They're actually poorly done procedures and malpractice, and they kill the patient. Those are our three main killers. Coronavirus is never going to touch any of those numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Any of them.
Right. And also, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, and not only that, but a 500,000 people die of the flu in this world every year. 500,000 die from the flu in the world. was it 30,000 roughly in the U.S. every year die from the flu.
And of course, many of them took the flu shot, and a lot of times the flu shot doesn't even work. In my experience with the flu shots, it didn't work because the flu strain tends to outfox the flu shot itself. As they say, someone builds a better mousetrap, someone builds a better mouse.
Well, and that's the problem. And people will think I'm totally against. I'm a balance of modern medicine with ancient medicine. I believe they both have valid places. But unfortunately, by working within the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the FDA as an agent, I just saw the inside workings of how it really works. And I'm not saying everyone in those agencies is bad. There's some people busting their butt every single day trying to cure diseases and trying to help people. Unfortunately, they're overridden by dirty, ugly bureaucrats who don't care one bit about except keeping their job and enriching themselves off the government.
And that is just an amazing point you told, too. And, of course, we'll get into Simple Life in just a minute. But first, listen to The Mike Wagner Show at themikewagnershow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. Look at a professional website without breaking your budget. Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs that blow the competition away. Call today at 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. Or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show. Get 10% off your first order. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level. Also, the Mike Wagner Show can be heard on the MikeWagnerShow.com. You can check our Facebook page at Facebook.com/The Mike Wagner Show. You can download and listen on Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Also on Anchor FM, Radio Public, iTunes, Google Play, Deezer, Stitcher, and more. Take the Mike Wagner Show with you on any mobile device. Subscribe to the Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel. Also follow the Mike Wagner Show on Instagram and Twitter today. We're here with author Gary Collins of The Simple Life. He was born and raised in the Sierra Nevada mountain range in California, graduated from San Diego State, and he's also got not just a Simple Life book, he's also got the Guide to Financial Freedom, Going Off the Grid, and we also talked about his experiences with working with the government and also in military intelligence, diplomatic security, and of course, getting to Simple Life, Decluttering Your Life as well, too, available on Amazon. Tell us more about the book and how can people just like you enjoy a simpler yet better stress-free life.
Yeah, which book? I have quite a few out there.
We're doing the simple one first. We're keeping it simple, by the way. The Simple Life.
Well, there's 4 books in the Simple Life series now. Number 5 and number 6 are being written right now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and what I've done is to explain to listeners is Going Off the Grid series is more for people looking to live that lifestyle. The Simple Life series is more about an a la carte of you can pick and choose what you want to either learn about or try and change in your life. So that's why they're kind of segmented as guide tos, the guide to optimal health, the guide to RV living if you're into that, want to do that, guide to financial freedom, guide to decluttering your life. They're all different little aspects, but the big picture of what I teach, and I call it my 3-legged stool of the simple life, is optimal health, financial freedom by being debt-free, and finding your life purpose. And I tell people, if you focus on those 3 things and you do all of them, you get them all in order, your life will be very, very different than the average American. I know this firsthand because I do it. That's where it came from. And so what do I mean by that? Well, optimal health means, again, there's no money in healthy people. The responsibility of your health is you. You are in charge of your health. And each of these is taught in order for you to take back the freedom that we have willingly given to big bureaucracies and governments. That's how I look at it. And so by you being and working on your health and being the healthiest you can be, it makes you more productive. You're going to feel better cognitive function, get more done. There's so much attached to your health. Everything revolves and bounces off your health. That's how I look at it. So I always tell people that's where you need to start. And again, we're losing the battle in this country. I can't even say how bad it is. It is so drastic. In the last couple of years, I can literally see Americans getting bigger. I've never seen it at any part of my life until now. I am seeing the average American get bigger and bigger and bigger every year. We are huge. And I don't mean this disparagingly. I don't mean this to, fat shame anyone. We are huge. We are massive compared to the rest of the world. We've got to fix this. The big thing is everyone, a lot of people want universal health care. I'm a veteran. Trust me, you do not want universal health care from your federal government. You do not want them to control it. Go to the VA. Ask a veteran how the VA works. You want no part of that. Secondly, we are so unhealthy in this country that we will collapse any single payer system. There is no way we can economically support it with our increasingly bad health. So you need to take control of your health. And not only that, but being healthy is far, far cheaper than it is to live like the average American, Western American diet and all the chronic diseases that follow. And I prove it in my financial freedom book. I talk about how much it costs to eat healthy, how to exercise. It is far cheaper, not only short term, but long term. Most average family will spend between $500,000 to $1 million eating out during their lifetime. An average family of 4.
Wow.
Yeah. That financial freedom book, it's unique in the sense that I did it all by math. I said, we're going to start from a young child. I'm going to run you all through life. And I'm going to prove to you every American has the potential to be a millionaire. We just blow all of our money. We don't have an earning problem in this country. We make far more than everyone else. Our problem is we spend every dime we have. Our economy is based upon consumerism. We don't produce anything anymore. Everything's produced in China. We buy it. It comes here. We support other economies. We support Walmarts, Amazons. We support all these huge corporations that don't have our best interest in mind. And I sell books on Amazon. Amazon has great services, but it's scary. Do we all want to work for Walmart and Amazon in the near future? Because that's where we're going. We buy nothing but crap. And that's where the financial freedom part of the stool comes in. I tell people you need to live debt free. It takes a huge amount of pressure off your life. For me, I sleep better than I've ever slept before over the last decade being debt free. I don't have a house payment. I own my house in the mountains. I own my land. I own my truck. I own my RV. I can lose basically everything and go out and get a minimum wage job and survive. That takes a lot of pressure off.
It does, I'm sure. And of course, you talked about the optimal health where, people go out to eat almost blowing anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million in their lifetime. It made me think of the farmers as well, too. And what is happening from your perspective with farming? It seems like that farming is in trouble right now in this country.
Well, and there's a good reason for it. Just 150, 200 years ago, almost every American was either a farmer or worked for a farmer. The majority of Americans were in one of those two categories. Now, only 3%, less than 3% of people work for a farm or are farmers today. Farming has become a massive industrial complex. The biggest industry in the world is food production. Okay, that's a problem in a way, if you look at it that way, because what we've gone down now, we produce a lot of crops and foods that the human body's not intended to consume. And I go into this in my Optimal Health book. We all come from hunter-gatherers. You have to look at the humans are the only organism on the planet that literally don't know how to feed themselves and move in order to thrive and survive. We're the only organism. We're it. We have lost our way so far. We don't even know how to eat and move anymore. And with that, what's happened is food is big industry. And the food pyramid was a huge scam between the sugar industry and the grain industry. Feed us carbohydrates and sugar. That's what we were told to do. Well, the human body's not intended to really consume that. Mm-hmm. Hunter-gatherers primarily, they did exactly that. They hunted animals. They ate animal flesh to include almost all of the animal. And then they would go out and hunt and gather during seasonally. So nuts, seeds, some tubers, and fruit. Fruit's very seasonal, and it would be mostly in the form of berries, which is low glycemic. So it's very different. When you look at what we're intended to eat to what we eat today, very different. Farmers are in trouble because they're monocroppers. They're monofarmers. They produce one thing. Farming and ranching historically is about sustainable, right? Sustainable agriculture, sustainable farming, ranching. That means you have to have animals, crops, rotation, everything rotates, everything moves. You have a variety of crops, you have a variety of animals, because that's a normal ecosystem. That ecosystem is able to reproduce and regenerate, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't regenerate soil. You can't regenerate, and have natural pesticides and herbicides that plants produce when they're in a mixture. So that's where we're running into problems. Is farmers now are low, that basically they have low profit margin. They have to produce a massive amount of one item, and most of them get subsidies because they can't survive. And they're producing foods that people are not even meant to consume, to include the animals. When you talk about CAFOs, confined animal feeding operations, well, that's where a lot of these diseases come from. Disease is a natural progression of overpopulation.
Mm-hmm.
Disease it comes from anywhere where you look at any major disease or virus that pops up. It usually almost always pops up from a highly densely populated area, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's nature thinning the herd. Nature realizes that there's too many organisms in that area to sustain. So that's where disease will come from. And also, obviously, being around a lot of waste, human waste, animal waste, all those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I think our farms are, our ranch farmers are in trouble. Is we don't produce small farms anymore. Small farms hire more people. They're much safer for the environment, and they actually sustain our environment as a whole. That's how it's meant to be. That's where we came from. Now it's just big, massive slaughterhouses, big fields of GMO corn and soybeans. Well, of course, yeah, you're going to have problems, because if you have a bad crop, what are you going to fall back on? If you are only raising corn and disease hits your corn, you got no other crops. You don't have animals. What are you going to sell?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I look at it as an economic situation too. Is that if you're doing poly farming, poly ranching, well, if something happens, you have other things to fall back on. You know what I mean? Your corn's not going to die, then your cows are going to die, then your chicken's going to die. Then your lettuce is going to die. It's not all going to die. Something will survive.
Mm-hmm.
And the odds of having some catastrophe due to that are very slim, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're using the natural ecosystem to sustain healthier crops. They've proven it. When you poly farm, the crops are far healthier. You lose less or no herbicides or pesticides at all,
Mm-hmm.
and you end up with a more densely nutritional crop as well. Produce higher nutritional value than monocropping.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we're at.
And that's amazing, too. You put that in perspective. And this made me think about the foods as well, too. What are the type of foods we're not meant to eat?
Pretty much everything. Much everything we're eating today. I mean, when you think of fast food restaurants, and not all restaurants are bad, but all those foods are highly processed. When I grew up, I'm a kid of the 70s, we still had restaurants that were, things were made from scratch. Things were, some of the vegetables were bought from local farmers. Well, that's very different than going into a restaurant and your avocados from, 3,000 miles away in another country that's been on boat, train, and trucks. That's very different, And so fast food, I mean, I hate to tell people, there is no healthy fast food. When I grew up, it was a treat. We went to McDonald's like once a month if we were lucky. I didn't go there 3 times a day and eat all my meals there. And not only that, but the food's highly processed. What's the typical rule? Stay on the outside of the grocery store. That's where the fruits, vegetables, and meats are. All those internal aisles. I mean, look at the aisle of potato chips and cereal. It is one solid aisle, both sides, cereal, potato chips.
Wow.
What do you think? Why do you think that is? Because they want us to buy them. They're cheap foods. They're easy to make, and they're going to kill us.
Mm-hmm.
When you get outside that hunter-gatherer, like processed grains, right? Let's look at that. When you look at carbohydrates, processed carbohydrates, it all has to go to a simple sugar. So even a complex carbohydrate is broken down to a simple sugar because that's the only way your body can absorb it, use it in your bloodstream as glucose. So no matter what form of carbohydrate you're buying, no matter what advertising's on it, in the end, your body's going to treat it one way, simple sugar. We eat, the majority of our calories today come from sweeteners and from processed grains. That's where most of our calories come from today. No time in human history have humans eaten that type of diet. Then you throw in the fact that not only are we eating a food group, primarily carbohydrates, but they're highly processed and they've been hybridized and genetically altered to something completely different than what they were just 100 years ago. So now we've got a double effect, and I always tell people simply this. There's one macronutrient you can survive without no problem: carbohydrates.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not saying all carbohydrates are bad, but they're very unique, and culturally, you know, depending what part of the world you are, your diet would be specific. Well, you would develop certain digestive enzymes and bacteria in your small and large intestine to break those starchy carbs and different types of foods down. So you see what I mean? Not only is our food highly different, but regionally our diets would be very different because we would actually adapt to the foods that we were surrounded by to survive.
That is amazing. And we'll talk about a couple of things like going off the grid, especially eating healthy, or guide to RV living and take some healthy food as well, too. We'll talk about a couple of those and also your Better Life podcast. But first, listen to The Mike Wagner Show at themikewagnershow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. Look at a professional website without breaking your budget. Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs that blow the competition away. Call today at 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. Or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show. Get 10% off your first order. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level. Also, the Mike Wagner Show can be heard on themikewagnershow.com. You can check our Facebook page at facebook.com/The Mike Wagner Show. You can download and listen on Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Also on Anchor FM, Radio Public, iTunes, Google Play, Apple, and more. Take the Mike Wagner Show with you on any mobile device. Subscribe to the Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel. Also follow the Mike Wagner Show on Instagram and Twitter today. We're here with author Gary Collins of The Simple Life. We got into Decluttering Your Life, Guide to Financial Freedom, and also many people are going off the grid, and some are living in RVs as well, too. You can just talk about briefly a couple of those books, Going Off the Grid, and also Guide to RV Living, which I personally looking forward to going in an RV for a while, just traveling, my wife and I.
Yeah, I'm actually recording this in my RV. I have lived
really?
in an RV.
So I'm recording my studio. You're recording in an RV. That is fantastic.
Yeah, I started living in an RV about 7 years ago now, maybe 8.
Uh-huh.
And I spend part of the year in my off-grid house. It's in the mountains, so there's snow. It's cold up there. It's 4-wheel drive in the summer when I'm up there. So I leave for the winter, and I live in my RV part of the year. And I'm transitioning. I just bought another property. I'll have a house in another part of the country where I'll go to. And I don't know if I'll do the RV thing. I've done it for a long time, spent many years in an RV. It's a blast. And I actually transitioned when I told you when I got rid of everything. I rented that small cottage for about 4.5 years. And then I transitioned into living in my RV. So it was kind of phases, steps at a time. But I know a lot of people now. I've been doing it for so long. A lot of RVs are insane today. I mean, they are nicer than $1 million houses.
I believe
ridiculous.
it. I believe it. And I know of a couple that has a huge fireplace and it's got a hot tub in it. And what else? It's like you have a fireplace in there. It's like you're almost like living in a mansion, seems like, but shrunk to an RV size.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. Those ones are expensive. They're not cheap, but
Right.
They're still cheaper than a house. And for me, I'm a single guy. Mine's very simple, but it's a 4 seasons. It's more rugged for off-road kind of stuff and mountain stuff. But there's an RV for any type of lifestyle. And, I actually have written most of my books in my RV. Because, my off-grid house, I've written portions of them, but part of the year, I write my books there. I run my business, and I've ran my business from my RV. So I had to do this. It didn't happen overnight. But that's why I wrote the RV book. Is a lot of people were asking me about it and how I did it. And it's for beginners. If you've been living in an RV, I don't think you're going to learn that much from it. I don't know why you would buy an RV living book if you've been doing it for 20 years, but I guess some people have done it. Mm-hmm. But, it's for beginners. It's for people who go, hey, I've never really owned an RV. I'm really interested. And what it does is it saves you a lot of time and money and understanding the different classes and choices you should make for your type of lifestyle and what you want to do. And that's why I wrote it. It's for the rookie to get out there and get started. And I always tell people this too. The first RV is not going to be your last RV. You buy it, you live in it, you learn from it, and then you'll see others and you'll probably change. And that's just typical with RV buyers. You buy your first one, lasts a couple years usually, and then you buy another one. Because as you're moving through life and you kind of learn a little bit more, they're a blast. They're fun.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like a lot of fun too, and especially going off the grid. Maybe tell us a little bit about the book and maybe just a few tips, a few pointers, and maybe some of the myths that people have about going off the grid.
Sure. I actually teach I teach a course on it for Mother's News Fair. I have a course that offered at some of the fairs. That book is interesting because that's what started this whole thing. Is I'd written those short little health books and actually a course that I wrote, which was a long story, a long time ago. The first thing I wrote is a total disaster. But I was doing an interview on a podcast for health. And the guy asked me, the host goes, what are you up to? And I go, I just bought 20 acres. I'm going to go build a house off the grid. He goes, wait, hold on. Time out. This interview's not ending. Hold on. and it was because it was my life choice. It wasn't anything I intended to write a book about. It was just something I'd wanted to do. I grew up early. I was trying to get back to my roots. I'd planned this many years before I even left the government. And so I get done with the interview and I got flooded with emails. Wow. Everyone's asking me, where'd you buy your land? How'd you do it? What are you building? How'd you start this whole adventure? And I went, oh, wow. I've just actually only built one road into the property. I better document this. So I documented it, and that's where going off the grid came from. So I started writing that probably 7 years ago, if not longer. It's only been out 3 years now, and I'm getting ready to do the second edition here, hopefully in the next year. But yeah, that book came from nowhere. And so I put this book together. I actually used a kind of a small publishing company that helped me put it together. And I just threw it out there. I honestly don't follow what I did, people. Don't follow Gary's writing career. It is a terrible way to go about it. And I put it on Amazon. The thing started selling. I didn't do a book launch. I didn't do any advertising. Now, don't get me wrong. It wasn't making me millions of dollars. And as you know, Mike, it is very, very, very difficult to make a living as an author. It is one of the hardest things to make a living at, probably in all life endeavors of working. Very difficult. I didn't know that. I just threw a book. And a publishing distribution company found it, and I have a distribution company now that distributes all my books. But it all started there. That's where that whole book came from. It was accidental, and so that started the whole Simple Life and all the other books. But that's I'd had this plan, and I teach people basically how I did it. And I wasn't a rookie either. I've owned several properties. My side hustle in the government was real estate. Wow. So I'm getting ready to build my fourth house from scratch. Not that I physically built the whole house, but project-wise, this will be the fourth house in my life. I've owned several pieces of land, houses, apartments, and so I wasn't a total rookie at this. But if you are a rookie, I've met them. And going off the grid, building something off the grid, even if you have a bit of a clue, which I told myself I had a bit, not much. It's very, very difficult, and it's real easy to fail at because there's not a whole lot on it. There's more now, but I always tell people the hardest part is finding the land, because most people today buy a house that's pre-constructed. It's already done. It's in a residential, right? Mm-hmm. So people don't understand the importance of where your land is, and not only that, but access to water. That's the biggest thing people screw up on, is they don't think about water. And I always say, if you don't have access to water on your land, you just bought a real expensive camping site, is what you did.
Oh, my.
Because hauling water sucks. And I know a lot of people who haul water to their property or live off-grid. It is brutal. And what are you going to do in the winter when everything's frozen? You're not hauling water. And if you do, there's a good chance it's all going to be frozen. Mm-hmm. So I tell people, if you want to live, and I call myself 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I'm not a hardcore guy. I'm not a soft either. I hunt, I fish, I chop down my own trees, I split my own firewood, I built a good portion of my house. But I tell people, if you want to go hardcore, well, that's different. If you want to not have your own septic system, haul your own water, that's a rough lifestyle, and you better be prepared for it. But I talk about living close to what normal society is as far as a house, but you're not tied to utilities. You have a bunch of freedom. If you were to walk in my house, you would not be able to tell it's off the grid. Is it smaller? Yes. Does it have more energy efficient appliances, LED lights? Yes. But I have a washer dryer. I have a water heater. I have 2 full bathrooms. It's only around 1,100 square feet. I don't have central heating and cooling, but I have a wall heater, and I have a portable air conditioner that I use when it's really hot. But my walls are also 14 inches thick too. So it's kind of those understanding what the lifestyle is, and that you are in control. You are your power system. You are, your utility system. No one's going to come out and fix your solar system most of the time. And if they do, they're going to charge you a lot. It's going to be upon you to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And so, it's just about being more self-reliant, like we talked about earlier, but it's beautiful. I mean, I go up there and I literally forget about everything. All the stress goes away. Not that I have a lot in my RV, but where I'm at, I'm more in a urban, it's more urban where I'm at. Up there, I'm totally rural. I'm on 50 acres. It's my place. It's in the forest. It's in the mountains. And the lifestyle, it's just phenomenal. I can't even explain it unless you do it. Mm-hmm. But the biggest trick would be take your time on the land. And also another tip I would give, and this is a big one, is make sure that you visit the areas that you're interested in. Just don't buy off the internet. Don't just go there once. Spend time there, get to know the community. I've done that with both properties. That the new one's going to be grid tied, but it's more rural. It's on 20 acres. That I kind of evaluated the people and the community and said, okay, are they open to outsiders coming in? Because some towns you go into that are very small don't want you there.
Amazing.
They don't want outsiders. A town of 50 to 100 people, they don't want your dumbass from LA. They don't want it. They want you to go away. But that doesn't mean they're not going to let you come in, right? But you just have to be open to that and understand that you need to be a part of that community, and some of those communities just aren't going to be a good fit. That's just life in general. And that's what I did. I evaluated the areas and went, oh, you know what? This is the place. I really like the people here. I fit in really well. And so you need to have that in the back of your mind too, that you're going to be a part of the community. Just unless you plan to live off grid and never go into town and never talk to anyone, well, that's a different story. If you're going to be totally isolated, but that honestly is very, very few people who live off the grid. Mm-hmm. That is a small minority that does that.
Uh-huh.
Most, yeah.
And of course, too, and it's also very important as well to do some research, but you also have a podcast as well, too, called Your Better Life, and tell us how I got that started and tell us all about your podcast.
Well, I'm a little different. If people couldn't tell, the way I do things, I just do things differently, and I'm not a big fan of social media. I'm just not. Never have been. And plus, I was in law enforcement and military. We couldn't have social media accounts. It was fairly new. Now you can. When I was in, you weren't allowed to have them. So I didn't have them until I got out. And then by the time I got out and got them, I went, these are stupid. I don't understand the point of these. And you know what I used them for? I actually used them to find criminals. That's what I used them for. That's what I use social media for in the government, because every criminal really liked to be on social media for some reason. And so, I built this all by podcast interviews, because podcasts were fairly new. I was small. People didn't know who I was. So podcasts were fairly easy back then to get on. And I love them. I did radio and some TV stuff. And everyone always wanted me, because I'd done so many interviews. When are you going to do your own podcast? And I go, well, that's a good question. I never had the bandwidth. It was very difficult. It was hard for me to run my business just to have internet access. I used Wi-Fi, which I still use to this day. And so I finally got to a point where the technology was good enough for me to do a regular podcast in the last year. Mm-hmm. So that's where that started. It is an open format, and I do it this way on purpose. As long as it's educational and we can learn something from it, we're going to talk about it. The one rule is it will never be a political show. We speak very, very little politics in it, but you have to. Some of the issues blend into politics. But, that's what the format is. My attitude is it's everything from entrepreneurship, authorship, self-publishing, marketing, running a small business, or having a career and living off the grid, RV living. We get into hunter-gatherer, societies, and we get into everything. Long as it's interesting, or consumerism, why society is the way it is today, why so many people are depressed. We talk about everything. And that's what I like about it. Mm-hmm. So,
and where can we find your Better Life podcast at?
You can find it on my website, which is thesimplelifenow.com, and it's on Stitcher, iTunes, everywhere. Just search Your Better Life. It should be the one that pops up. My ugly face is on it right there. If you see a face on it and a guy in a hat, that's me in a beard. That's the podcast.
Okay. All right. We're looking forward to that as well, too. And it's just a couple of things. We love to have you back on. We have author Gary Collins of The Simple Life here on the Mike Wagner Show. Just a couple more things. We'd love to have you back on sometime in 2020. Who do you consider biggest influence in your career?
Oh, boy. That's a really good one. I have so many influences. And I've used many of them that kind of shape me. Probably are you talking just in general in life, or what I've done today?
It can be just in life, what you've done. So basically it's up to you.
I would say probably the biggest influence, we'll do this a little differently. The biggest influence I think in my life was growing up poor and striving to do better. That was a huge push in my life. And I had a lot of role models, and that's why it's hard for me to get into it. I had coaches, teachers, professors, people who helped me along the way. And that's why I do what I do today, because I wouldn't be here without those people. There's people looking out for me at times. I didn't have the best childhood, but people were watching. And I think that's really important, and that we've kind of lost that today. And then in my writing career, actually, it would be Stephen Pressfield. The guy who wrote The War of Art, the Legend of Bagger Vance, and a whole host of other books. The War of Art was a book that I read when it first came out, and I can't even remember who referred it to me. It's a self-help book, but it's for writers, and I wasn't a writer at the time. And it just, that book shaped my life, because it told me that the biggest problem in my life is me. And always will be. And he did it in a really good way. He calls it resistance. He uses the terminology resistance. And I just found it's a short book. It's very to the point. I think that was pretty much an accidental book as well. It was one of those that he kind of had the idea, but it came out of writer's block, and it wasn't really intended. And I emailed him when I first started writing, and I just emailed him probably 3 weeks ago, and he still emails me back. And I considered him to be a big, big influence on my career and writing path.
That is fantastic. And what's the best advice you can give to anybody at this point?
The best advice I can give people, it's tough love. But if you follow me, I have a saying, if you're looking to chase butterflies, pet bunny rabbits and ride unicorns, I'm probably not for you. but
well said.
But it's stop whining and take responsibility for your own actions. And just remember that we are. If you're here, especially in North America, but in the United States, we have it better than anyone else. And the only thing stopping us from living the life we want is us.
And that is something to keep in mind. Gary, I just want to say a big thank you for your time. You've been fantastic. Looking forward to having you again soon. And just a couple of things. Tell us once again your upcoming projects, what's your website, how the people contact you, and where can people purchase your books?
My books are sold everywhere, pretty much. So Amazon, I think some are on iTunes. But, the bigger outlets, you go search Barnes & Noble, they're pretty much everywhere. The website, you can buy them on my website as well. It's a full functioning e-commerce website. That's thesimplelifenow.com. And the way and I'm an oddball. Since I don't use social media, if you email me with a very rational, well thought out question, or want to just say thank you, you can get a hold of me. I'm very lucky in that sense because my followers are out making it happen. And I say not watching videos of cats and trolling on Facebook. So
perfect.
Yeah. So if you want to get a hold of me, there's a contact form on my website. Just shoot me an email.
And the email is?
I don't give it out. You got to fill out the form. You got to put in a little effort.
Okay, well, I just want to make that point to everybody as well, too, and help out. So, Gary, just want to say a big thank you for your time. You've been fantastic. It's great living the simple life with you. Do us a favor, keep us up to date. Looking forward to having you again soon. You've been fantastic.
Thanks for having me on, Mike. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. The Mike Wagner Show can be heard on Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube, Anchor FM, Radio Public, and themikewagnershow.com. Please support our program with your donations at themikewagnershow.com. Join us again next time for another great episode of The Mike Wagner Show.